Good evening and welcome to another edition of the COVID-19 Pandemic Update on Channels Television in collaboration with the Ford Foundation. I'm Millicent Nwaka. Here are some of the highlights this hour. Today, President Muhammadu Buhari, other African leaders held virtual meeting on extraordinary China-Africa Summit on solidarity against COVID-19. Nigerians look up to police and judiciary for solutions as cases of rights abuses and rape permeate parts of the country. And Brazil reports almost 35,000 new COVID-19 cases, its highest daily figure. The death toll from COVID-19 has risen to 455 after the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) announced 490 new infections across 15 states and the Federal Capital Territory, bringing the total cases in the country to 17,148, with 5,623 patients recovered. According to the NCDC, 25 of the 31 deaths were recorded in Lagos State between June 12th and 15th, hence the announcement on June the 16th. A breakdown by region shows Lagos in the southwest has 7,461 confirmed cases, followed by the FCT in the north central with 1,324 cases. Kano tops in the northwest with 1,158. River State overtakes Edo with the highest cases in the south-south with 631 infections. Borno State leads in the northeast with 445 cases, while Abia State has 173 cases, the highest in the southeast. Now, as Nigeria continues to fight the coronavirus on several grounds, Nigerian lawmakers have also thrown their hat in the ring. Two chambers of the National Assembly are about to enact a new legislation that would provide legal backing to the management of infectious diseases and pandemics in the country. The bill, known as the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill 2020, is sponsored by the Speaker of the House, Femi Gbajabiamila. The bill seeks to repeal the Quarantine Act of 2004. Its purpose of the 82-section bill is to strengthen the NCDC, make it more proactive rather than reactive when there is an outbreak, and a list of other reasons. But since it came to the limelight, the bill has generated a lot of controversy that has been in the public space. So let's take a closer look at the scope of this particular bill. Now, the DG NCDC is placed in charge of administering the contents of the bill, subject to any general or special directions by the Minister of Health. Under the same bill, the President has powers to declare a public health emergency, designate public health emergency zones, and may also issue orders prohibiting, restricting the movement of persons. Still under the bill, the NCDC DG has wide discretionary powers to prevent and curb the outbreak and spread of infectious diseases within Nigeria. The DG also has powers to curb the international spread of infectious disease. His powers intersect with that of port health authorities. Now, the bill also provides guidelines on protocols and requirements on vaccination and other prophylaxis. It's a long list of items, and this actually brings us to the next slide, and that really is the bone of contention looking at all of this. Several things. A lot of Nigerians and stakeholders say the lawmakers seem to be in a hurry to pass the bill, as it speedily passed first and second readings at the House of Representatives in April. The second is the gaps. At least a group of 40 NGOs are calling for a public review of the bill, highlighting some gaps, like 97% of the bill is copied from the Singapore Infectious Diseases Act of 1977. Others have talked about poor drafting and draconian wording of some of the bill's provisions and recommendations. They've talked about too much discretionary powers given to the NCDC DG and the Health Minister. There's also been talk about the absence of the Human Rights Impact Assessment Test. Now, it's really a long list when you look at how all of this, but let's take a look right now as to how this bill actually affects you as a citizen. And that is to say, if this bill becomes law today, these are some of the things that will come to fore, and that is it becomes an offence without reasonable excuse. Once you fail to comply with an order made under the bill, you may be arrested, and you may be even arrested without a warrant. Another thing is that you cannot withhold information pursuant to a requirement under the relevant law. Your doctor can actually divulge your medical records without your permission, and that doesn't happen right now. The government also has the right to order a post-mortem examination whether or not your faith aligns with it. And there's also the issue of supplying wrong medical information. And this may earn you as much as 2 million naira fine with a 2-year jail term. So it's really like a long list, but essentially the process has started, and that is to see that there is a balance, and stakeholders are calling for a more robust consultation. It's a lot of expectation from Nigerians that a more comprehensive draft bill that takes the concerns of all into account, that it will materialize as the nation fights the COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's quickly take you to Bauchi State, where our correspondent Hajara Aliyu has the latest on the COVID-19 fight in the state. Hajara.
The first thing you do before going into the COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center is to wash your hands. Once you gain access into the center, the floor markings are visible. These markings are meant to ensure that people are kept at a safe distance in case of more than one person coming in. And here is the reception. The job of the man here is to ensure infection prevention control. I'm going into the meeting room to meet with Dr. Yahaya. He's the coordinating consultant here. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Mr. Yahaya. Yeah, fine. Mr. Yahaya will be taking us through their activities here at the center.
This Emergency Operations Center is exclusive for the Rapid Response Team. The team gathered here to meet, analyze data, and distribute the data. We have dashboards here. These dashboards are information, data collected from the field, analyzed and posted here. Whatever information you see outside is being collected here and then pushed to the public. I will take you to the operations room. This is where the data is being collected, analyzed, and distributed. Also, they educate the public. The public can ask questions related to how to mitigate the spread of the virus. One of the screens, we have cameras being installed in the reference laboratory and some isolation center just to monitor the activities there. But we are conscious about the privacy of those at the isolation centers or the reference lab. So we don't take pictures within the lab, but outside what is happening there, we can monitor that. I will take you to the meeting break-up room. The meeting break-up room is exclusive for the center's operations. Whenever there is critical issues to be discussed, some of those pillars will meet in here so that they will discuss critical issues that could help the response team respond as quickly as they can. This is exclusive for not more than 4 persons to meet here.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah. This center is being established to strengthen response to COVID-19 and other emerging health emergencies. The center was inaugurated earlier by the governor of Bauchi State and officials of USAID and JFIGO. From the COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center, Hajara Aliyu for COVID-19 updates.
Thank you, Hajara. President Muhammadu Buhari today participated in a virtual meeting of African heads of state and the Chinese president. The president in the extraordinary China-Africa summit on solidarity against the COVID-19 said that Nigeria would support and join any joint and collective action plan at regional and global levels to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and its fallout. He asked that nations face a common, pervasive and invisible enemy. Therefore, it is important that countries remain united to save our shared humanity. The meeting is co-hosted by Chinese President Xi Jinping, South Africa, the rotating chair of the African Union AU, and Senegal, co-chair of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Now, between January and May this year, the Nigeria police has recorded 717 cases of rape and gender-based violence. According to the police, 799 suspects have been arrested. Now, these troubling figures, according to the Inspector General of Police, has necessitated the need for collaboration between all parties involved. It's been weeks of activism against rape, with the National Human Rights Commission, civil society organizations calling on the federal state governments to address the root cause and prosecute perpetrators of the act.
Think about this, I've gotten crazy, I'm not getting myself some time.
The expression of a father who is living in agony after his 6-year-old daughter was defiled. Thankfully, justice has been served and he's been sentenced to 30 years in prison. While Lagos State has had its share with 32 cases reported to the police between January and June 2020, some incidents have dominated the news in recent times, such as the case of Vera Omazuwa in Edo State, Barakat Bello in Oyo State, or an 85-year-old woman raped by her grandson in Niger State.
I ran into the room of my grandmother. She was sleeping, so I went and held her.
A research by the federal government in 2014 suggests that the issue of sexual violence is a long way from being over.
Child sexual abuse is a huge public crisis that has now reached epidemic proportions. 1 in 4 children, 1 in 4 girls, and 1 in 10 boys will be sexually abused before they reach the age of 18.
According to experts, medical science shows that individuals who carry out sexual violence are mentally ill, and the survivor has no blame in it. So more than before, it's important that parents give more attention to their children to protect them from harmful individuals. In John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
We have more on that story as the police explains what they are doing to reduce the amount of sexual and gender-based violence in the country. To join us again. Welcome back. Now, the Public Relations Officer of the Nigeria Police Force, DSP Frank Mba, joins us from our Bauchi studios. We'd like to thank you for joining us on the program. I'd like to begin with what indeed a lot of activists are saying shouldn't be happening, and that is, would you say that the cases of rape that is happening across the country, we're getting to a stage that we can call it a pandemic?
Thank you, Millicent, for having me on this program. First of all, let me acknowledge the fact that indeed we have big challenge in our hands, particularly as it regards the increasing cases of not just rape, but also other forms of sexual violence and offenses across our country. But the truth really, I don't really think we've gotten to a point where we'll describe it as a pandemic, but it is actually a problem that deserves all men of goodwill and women of goodwill to come together and unite to fight off the scourge. And the good news is the fact that Nigerians have realized that indeed we have a problem in our hands, and citizens have woken up from sleep, and when we saw those protests, we saw those sensitization campaigns going on across the country, we welcome the campaigners because we see them not as lawbreakers, but we see them as partners in progress. And we need to continue that kind of sensitization and campaign to at least help to break the conspiracy of silence and also give victims of these kind of crimes the needed moral and psychological support they need that is required of them to actually step forward and make necessary report. And if you notice again,
if I were just quickly cutting, and that is with what you're saying, that it appears people have woken up. But the question also arises, and that is, what explanation would you give as to why it's become widespread? Looking at the number from January of this year to where we are now, is it a case of the lockdown ease? Is it as a result of the pandemic? Or are we looking at cases that were not reported and are now becoming reported?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. One of the major causal factors is actually the lockdown. What the lockdown did was it confided people into an enclosed environment. One of the key conditions for rape and particularly for sexual molestation of minors to actually take place is opportunity. Whenever you're investigating a case of a sexual molestation of a young person, as an investigator, you must be looking at for those times, those moments where the victim and the suspect had time together without a third party being with them. That's to say access and privacy are key. And during this period, a lot of our young girls are not going to school. A lot of them are locked down in their homes. And also some of these sexually perverted men are also idling away. So that provided a kind of enabling environment for this kind of crimes to thrive. And of course, the other factor for me is the fact that traditionally, rape cases and other forms of sexual violence offenses are never reported. As a matter of fact, some statistics out there shows that sometimes up to 90% of these cases are not reported. They are even worse when they has to do with sexual molestation of children or when they has to do with incest, in which case both the victim and the suspect have got blood relationship or filial relationship. So, but what is happening right now is that gradually we are breaking down that conspiracy of silence, and we're also taking advantage of technology. The social media is emboldening people, and sometimes people who could not even have access to police stations, to medical facilities, are beginning to use their smartphones to actually make some of these reports. And so what you are seeing might not be, at the end of the day, an upsurge in the real sense of the word, but rather an increased reporting of these cases, which is also very, very important to us. Because without these cases coming to the fore, governmental agencies and people like you will not be talking about them.
Now, does the Nigeria police encourage out-of-court settlements for cases of sexual and gender-based violence?
We do not. And I will say that in very unequivocal terms. The rape cases are not compatible cases. Rape cases are very serious offenses. They are felonies. And we have continued to prosecute most of the suspects we arrested. Even in cases where some of the families of the victims have approached the police to actually drop these cases, there have been most of these cases where the police insist on going ahead to prosecute these cases. And it can be very, very frustrating it can also be very disappointing when, as an investigator, you work so hard to put your facts together, you work too hard to put your bits and pieces of evidence together and build up what you think is a formidable case file, only for relatives of the victims to approach the police to say they are not interested in the prosecution of those cases. And in some of those cases, the police have gone ahead to prosecute, but we have always run into the brick wall, because once the family of the victims say they are no longer interested, what you will find is that even when you call them to come to court to testify, they testify not as state witnesses, but they testify as hostile witnesses, and that can be very frustrating. So if anybody out there is telling you that the police are playing part in trying to discourage prosecution of cases, I will tell you perhaps those are things that happened in the 1950s and the 1970s, and not the police of today. Today, we've got well-trained hands, particularly in the gender desk units across the country. These are police officers that have received specialized investigations on methods of interrogation, interview, and management of victims of rape and other sexual offenses. And we have made substantial progress so those kind of issues don't arise
Nigeria is counting on the Nigeria Police Force. We'd like to thank you, DCP Frank Mba, also the Force's Public Relations Officer. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Millicent. It's always a pleasure to serve.
Now, Brazil has reported a national record of nearly 35,000 new coronavirus cases in a 24-hour period, even as the government has insisted that the outbreak is under control. The health ministry added new cases, but Brazilian media, in collaboration with state health departments, said the figure was probably undercounted. In the U.S., 9 states hit record high of COVID-19 cases as Vice President Pence calls fear of second wave overblown. We're hearing the European Commission asking that global leaders agree on joint purchases of potential vaccines against COVID-19.
In Latin America, Brazil has seen a sharp rise in its number of cases as fatalities in the region double roughly every 2 to 3 weeks. The country has recorded more than 920,000 cases, the second highest in the world, and a total of 45,421 deaths. Peru's also experiencing the same sharp increase in its number of cases. It holds the 8th position for the highest number of cases globally, with 7,056 deaths. Furthermore, Peru's problem is now being compounded by shortages of oxygen for patients with respiratory problems, creating anxiety for family members and price gouging, resulting in a higher death toll. In the United States, 6 states have seen a record spike in new COVID-19 cases. Infections nearly doubled in Alabama and South Carolina during the last week. Other states seeing record spikes include Florida, Arizona, Texas, and Oklahoma.
The NCDC continues to work closely with states. You can find the latest national strategy to scale up access to coronavirus disease testing in Nigeria and other public health advisory. Let's take you to the live feed of the World Health Organization's website. Each moment, there are regular updates about the spread of the pandemic. There are also the public health response, both at national and subnational levels. You can take a closer look at some of the numbers in real time. And our website, channelstv.com, has the latest updates and news all around the world and in Nigeria, all at your fingertips, channelstv.com. And that's our COVID-19 special edition on Channels Television in collaboration with the Ford Foundation. I'm Millicent Walker. Thank you for watching.